Welcome to the Beantown podcast. This is Quinn David Furness. I'm the host, creator, best boy, producer, second unit production. Here's my question. You watch movie credits and they're always talking about the second unit. Second unit? What is that? Second unit. What can someone out there who is a movie buff or someone who went to school for production, can they tell me what a second unit production crew does? Because, like, in theory, okay, I can come up with something. I could give you a kind of a vanilla BS answer based on what I think it is, but what do you actually have the second unit for? Is it like the practice squad in football? Do you just keep it on reserve so you pull up a player when your director of photography gets injured? What's sort of the deal there? So that's my question. Regardless of the role, I fill all the roles and I fill all the holes here at the Beantown podcast, because this is Quinn David Furness, and this is the start of our fall 2018 tour. We are coming to you live from Indianapolis, Indiana. In case you are wondering, yes, we are podcasting from the road, taking a little page out of my good friend's playbook, the Car Ride Convos podcast. Those guys are awesome. You can go like them. Facebook, follow them on Twitter. Car Ride Convos, I think, is their handle. Maybe Car Ride Convos podcast. I don't know. But they're pretty active on there, actually. They're on their way to becoming social media giants. And I'm thinking, hey, maybe if I do what they're doing, a little podcast in the car action, we can pick it up with the followers, the likes, the subscribes, the rates, the shares. Thank you to all of my followers, particularly those who have put in an order for the Beantown Fall 2018 Tour Dates t-shirt. Loving the support. And it's $22. We're going to have that order form open for another 5 or 6 days. So if you are listening now and you're just kind of getting acquainted with the Fall 2018 Tour and you want a t-shirt to show your friends, let me know. Shoot me a message. We can get you in on the order form. It's going to be $22 flat. That's shipping included for everyone. The thing to know is that the online order closes on Friday or Saturday. That's when we start making the shirts. That's when we start shipping them. I got to do that so that you can get these shirts out, in the middle of the tour, not after the tour. So thank you to all the fans. Thank you for following me on Twitter. I'm at White Buns with a Z. You can always email us, beantownpodcast@yahoo.com. That's Beantown, BEANT podcast@yahoo.com. Listener discretion is advised when you're listening to the Beantown podcast, particularly the Beantown podcast in a car. What if you were listening to the Beantown podcast in a car while you were driving in the car? Wow, I know what you're saying. Well, how are we supposed to do that? It's a podcast. It's on the internet. No car on the internet. I've got good news for you. Apple Podcasts, thanks to our partnership with those guys with iTunes, you can actually download the podcast right onto your phone or your tablet or your other mobile device. You plug it into the USB port in your car, boom. You got 24 karat magic, Bruno Mars, surround sound quality. Maybe you got a little Ariana Grande intro music. You believe God is a woman. And you got it right in the car. 5.1 Dolby Digital surround sound, coming to you live with the Samson Q2U microphone series. It's that crisp audio quality, which, speaking of crisp audio quality, apologies to everyone. I feel like I let the fans down, I let myself down last week. In case you're wondering what happened with the audio quality, I don't have an answer for you. I just straight up don't. I did everything exactly the same way. We've been doing it for 8 months. It was honestly the most basic, standard podcast setup I could have. Sitting on the flower chair at 817 St. Paul Street. We were coming to you live from Beantown. Laptop on the coffee table, microphone plugged in, only one, not two. No, there's nothing weird with the two mic setup, which can get tricky. And we recorded and we listened back, and you all heard it. If you ever wanted to know what a podcast would sound like from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, I think we have our answer here. It was James Cameron or Michael Bay. I think it's James Cameron does all the stuff with his submarine underwater and like going to the Mariana Trench and stuff. I'm kind of that, but for podcasters. So just call me the James Cameron of podcasting now, because apparently I do my podcast underwater. So that episode is a little bit of a lost episode. That's okay. We weren't covering too much heavy stuff. I'm just glad that it wasn't an episode like with my uncle. Uncle Andy came on 2 weeks ago. We talked about a whole lot of stuff. Part 1 of our interview. Jack Links, of course, fantasy football, Rice Lake, Wisconsin, the chronotype, all that stuff. We got some good intel on, but that was clear quality. I don't know what happened last week. I apologize. I really feel like I let the fans down. So we're going to continue to ensure that we're going to get crisp audio quality every time. Samsung QTU microphone series. We did a whole lot of tests at a rest stop before starting our recording here today, so I think everything is good to go, and if it's not, then I'm just going to lose my freaking mind. But listener discretion is indeed advised. Getting back to the original point, when you're listening to the Beantown podcast, number 1, we'll occasionally use some 18-plus language here and there, although typically we're pretty good with that stuff, I like to think. Number 2, and last week was a living testament to this, the podcast is objectively terrible. So that's that. What's going on? Fall 2018 tour, we've been advertising it pretty heavily on social media, on the internet. If Facebook gives me another free $30 boosted credit, you might see a boosted advertisement on your page. I try not to get into the boosted stuff because I know once I kind of like what I see and get a feel for, oh man, now we're starting to see some likes, some subscriptions coming in an inorganic way where I'm paying for it. It'll just like, I'll get used to it in a sense, and it'll start to become part of my budget, and you say, well, it's only $30 and that's not too much. But then next thing you know, you're spending millions and millions on your podcast that only has 50 to 60 listeners on average a week, and that's just not sustainable. So we'll continue to look into the boosted stuff. I did it once because Facebook gave me a free coupon for it. I didn't spend a single dime of my own money on that. I think if I was going to boost a post, it'd probably be the Scalabrini shout out. Thank you to the fans for making that connection. That was a lot of fun. You're wondering, Brian Scalabrini, former NBA champion with the Boston Celtics, pretty famous player. White Mamba is his nickname. That video is on our page. It's on YouTube, all that stuff, Beantown Podcast. So anyways, let's see. But the fall tour, we are, of course, in Indianapolis today. Before I fill out the rest of these tour dates here, I meant to make one other apology regarding the audio quality last week. Our good friend, No Last Co., great company, some Chicago photography stuff. We read their ad for the first time. That was an exciting time for everyone because it was the first ever Beantown podcast paid sponsor. Really exciting. We've been going for that for, ever since we started, 8 months now. But apologies because the audio quality was really bad. So I know I told you, No Last Co, that, we were going to get your ad going a couple other times. I'm not going to read the full ad as it's written out to me today because I'm in the car and, just trying to stay alive at this point, like the Bee Gees said. But go follow places.in.chicago on Instagram. They've got a lot of good stuff. They did not have a post or a picture up last time I checked, but hopefully that's changed in the last week. Again, it's no and then a period, then no, that's not right. It's places, then a period, then in, then another period, then Chicago. Places.in.chicago. Check them out on Instagram. Give them a like. Give them a follow. Beantown Podcast follows them, so you should too. We're going to get you your full ad going again next week. If you are interested in sponsoring or advertising on the Beantown Podcast, we do a whole lot of different options. We do 30-second reads. We do 2-minute reads, whatever you need to get for your company. I can do them beginning, middle, or end. I'll change the pricing structure a little bit, but it's pretty reasonable. I understand, look, my production value is pretty low. It's a pretty low budget operation, so I'm not asking for too much. But if you are interested in advertising the Beantown podcast, shoot me an email, beantownpodcast@yahoo.com. That's Beantown, BEANTOWN podcast @yahoo.com, and we'll get that figured out. Today, Indianapolis, Indiana, as we are driving along I-65 here. God's country, Mike Pence, gotta love it. We were just at the gas station filling up for our drive into the Windy City here, and that gas station, boy, that was pretty rough. A lot of white people, which is not why it was rough. I love the white people, big fan of their work. I love Martin Short, but smelled pretty bad. Boy, the guy working behind the counter looked like he had been to hell and back. A lot of tattoos, looking pretty rough, pretty slow reaction time. You go into the gas station. I always love this gas station. It's God's country, right? You get and here comes the 18 plus stuff. You get like the penis rings. They're dispensers, and for you ladies, I don't know if they have something similar to this in your bathroom, but you go to like rest stops, gas stations. I'm sure that's all over the place. This isn't just a Midwest thing, but I certainly can remember that like on road trips growing up. You go into bathrooms and there are like dispensers for whatever you call them, like pleasure rings, and they got like different flavors and stuff. And I don't know. Personally, I have never tried that stuff out. It seems a little risky. If I'm going TBH here, really I'm not that interested in sliding stuff around my hoo-hoo. So, I don't know, Mike Pence, if you're listening to this, if you're aware of this disturbing practice that has infiltrated America's gas station and rest stop bathrooms, but yeah, penis rings. I don't know if anybody has ever had any experiences with these things. Give us a shout out. We'd love to have you on podcast for an interview, because I just have so many questions. So anyways, that's what the bathroom was like. A lot of graffiti, a lot of stuff on the walls. No mirror. Always love that. Makes me think like I'm at a national park or something, like a bathroom out in the middle of the woods. No mirrors. Pretty smelly. So we got it out of there as quickly as you can say Mike Pence 2020. So we are now on the road. We are heading up to Chicago, which is where we will be coming to you live from next weekend. After that, we are going to try to do an episode live from Bowling Green. Is the hope there 2 weeks from now. That episode will probably come out pretty late, because I don't think I'm scheduled to get into Bowling Green until the very end of the weekend, Sunday night. I'll keep you all updated on that. After that, we're going to be looking to come to you live from Rockford, Illinois. Very exciting news. My good friend, accountant extraordinaire, and a pretty nifty musician, Matthew Fiedler, is going to be joining us live on the podcast. You'll remember Matthew from back in March, I think, is when we did our taxes. Donald Trump will not release his taxes, but Quinn David Furness sure as hell will. We release our taxes. If you're a new listener, I actually really like that episode. I will listen to that occasionally here and there, once every other week, just because I think there's actually a lot of good information on there. Some of it's really funny. Some of it's actually, we had an accountant on the podcast. Matthew's got a lot of good tips. So we got that. We've got a Beantown Unplugged special in the works. Not going to reveal any details about it, but let's just say when you put two excellent musicians together in one room, you never know what's going to happen. So there's your little teaser trailer. After that, we'll come to you live from Sioux Falls. Should be a good time. South Dakota. I don't think there's ever been a podcast done live from South Dakota, so that should be pretty exciting. After that, we'll be in Baltimore for a weekend. Have a podcast come to you live from there, followed by another podcast live from Chicago, and then we'll have one. It's looking like Nashville. I know on the on the social media posts. It said Nashville/Memphis. It's looking like Nashville. We might try to do something, a little midweek check-in from Memphis, maybe return to the Mississippi since that was a crowd favorite with the ambience and the donuts. And then we'll be back in Beantown for our Halloween special, and that will take us into November, and we'll get into the holiday season. So anyways, that's the fall tour. Again, thank you to everyone who bought shirts. It's not too late. $22 flat rate. You can find the design online. Front says Beantown Podcast Fall 2018 Tour. Back says Fall 2018 Tour, and then it has a list of all of our tour dates, which I think we're 8 tour dates I think we have. So that's exciting. How many podcasts do you know that go on the road? Other than the Car Ride Convos podcast, because that's just where they're stationed on the road. But it's exciting. Thank you to everyone who's reached out about shows, tickets. Love you all. Love your support. Please remember, if you are listening, if you're just casually listening on Apple Podcasts or iTunes, and you're thinking, hey, I like what I hear, go ahead, throw us 5 stars. Smash that like button, as my good friend PJ would say. The more stars we get, the better content we get, and there's no real reason for that, but I just, having a bigger ego always helps. So anyways, do that. Leave us a little review if you like, and get some paraphernalia, get some propaganda, get some regalia. It'll be fun. So anyways, what did I do in Indiana? I was in Indianapolis for about 24 hours as we are now leaving the city, but it was a good time. So I got to meet up with a bunch of friends from undergrad, and actually, so this is really interesting. A lot of people have a fantasy football league for their quote-unquote school league, and that is the case for me, but my kind of relationship to these guys is really fascinating. So when I was a freshman in college, after I finished up freshman year, I was an orientation leader the summer between my freshman and my sophomore years of college. Pretty common job for an undergraduate to have. In our roles, or in our position, we were orientation leaders for incoming freshmen, which is the majority of people who are starting their undergrad careers, but there are also a team of undergraduate workers who are transition leaders, and they did the same thing but for transfer students. So I was an orientation leader. I met a guy who was one of these transition leaders for the transfer students. His name was Chris, and in addition to Chris, there was another transition leader named Kevin who lived in the same apartment complex that I lived in my sophomore year. So kind of had some loose connections. I didn't know these guys super well, but they seemed like nice guys. Chris we got a huge slowdown on the highway here. I don't know what the issue is. Chris invited me going into sophomore year of college to play an intramural football team. And I was actually excited because I had played on an intramural football team my freshman year with people I lived with in my freshman hall. But I think maybe the guys I played with had started their own team without me, or or they just disbanded. I don't remember what happened. So I got invited by Chris to play on his intramural team, and I got to meet a bunch of his buddies, including my friend Hunter. He was really nice, great guy. And so we played intramural football together our sophomore year. We played again my junior year, which ended up turning into my senior year. Anytime I'm on the podcast, you hear me talking about my junior year of college, I actually mean my senior year because they ended up becoming the same thing. And then when I was playing our last year of college, playing intramurals with Hunter and Chris, Hunter's brother, started at DePaul. He came on, Connor. And we started a fantasy football league that year, which was fun. So this year might be our 4th year. I don't remember exactly how old this league is, but also met my friend Greg. And what ended up happening, I think Hunter and his brother and Greg, they might have had some sort of, I don't know the details on this, but there might have been some sort of falling out with some of the other guys, including Chris, who was kind of my initial connection into this world, into this group of people. But I kind of kept it going with Hunter and his brother and our friend Greg, and we started a lead together, and I really this is interesting because these weren't guys that I hung out with a ton in undergrad. We would play intramural football together, occasionally like get together on a Sunday to watch a game, but otherwise I didn't, kind of different worlds. I just happened to share one community, one connection, and now I play with Greg's in our league, and Hunter's two brothers, Connor and then Tristan, and then honestly the rest of the guys are their friends from I think probably for the most part same school. I just didn't know them when I was at school, but guys I don't really know, but guys who are super nice. We all got together this weekend. Hunter just bought a cool new house in the Indianapolis area, which is really exciting. Homeowner, first time. That's awesome. He's got a puppy, a Great Dane, who is 8 weeks old. If you're friends with me on Snapchat, you saw some of those pictures. He's adorable. Malcolm is his name. That's Malcolm with 2 L's. And his paws are way too big for his body. And it was just a great time. Those guys are pretty big drinkers, pretty big partiers. Not that I'm not, but I was really tired all day yesterday, getting up at 3 a.m. to get to Chicago and then drive to Indianapolis from there. So had a couple beers, but didn't go too crazy and ended up falling asleep, and I think they stayed up super late again. But it was a great time. We did our fantasy draft. Let's see some of my highlights. Who are some of my big heavy hitters. So this is an auction draft, so this is different than your standard snake draft in that instead of just like going in order and that's just how you do it, when it's your turn you get to pick. On auction draft you get $200, and it's not your own money. This is just $200 internet dollars, although this league we play for is for cash. But you get $200 and you have to pick 15 players to fill out your entire team, and just like a regular auction, you bid, and whoever gets the highest bid gets that player, and you just go through 150 different players bidding on them until you have 10 teams with 15 guys each. So some of the guys I spent the most money on, Odell Beckham Jr. from the Giants, who really wasn't on my radar, wasn't a guy that I was like targeting before the draft started. He's not been a guy that I've been targeting any of my drafts, but I don't know what happened. You start bidding and all of a sudden you just don't want to lose. So I got Odell Beckham Jr. I got Devontae Adams, who plays for the Packers, and Devonta Freeman for the Falcons, Alex Collins. I got Russell Wilson, who's my favorite quarterback, so that was exciting. Baltimore defense, Michael Crabtree. So Greg Olsen, who I had last year, and he was good until he got hurt. So I'm excited for this year. In this league, last year I got second place. I lost to Greg in the Super Bowl championship. So he had a good time with that this weekend, making sure to not let anyone forget it. But it was fun, fantasy drafts. Get to see those guys about once a year now. Although it's crazy because I've been in Baltimore now the last 2 years that these drafts have taken place, and last year I just happened to be in Chicago just visiting, just seeing friends and stuff, not for work or anything, but their draft just like happened to be while I was there. I didn't know about it beforehand, and then I found out, and so I got to go to Hunter's apartment to do that. And then this year we had planned it more in advance, but I was already going to be in Chicago for work, so it worked out great there. So yeah, I don't know how long I'm going to be able to keep getting lucky with work and stuff and pleasure trips, pleasure rings for your penis, continuing to line up. But as long as it does, it's fun. We have a good time. Honestly, it kind of feels like I'm a little kid again at like sleepovers. There's like Doritos and Mountain Dew. I guess the only difference now is you have Busch Light in addition to all that stuff. But watching college football, watching baseball, video games, all that stuff. So it's a good time. Makes me feel like a kid again. I'm drinking my coffee here. It's a fun time. So that's primarily what I did in Indiana while I was here. Beautiful state, very flat state as we were driving through, or driving right past Purdue University right now. Shout out to my college football team, the Northwestern Wildcats, with the, I don't know, tough to call it an upset, but they went into Purdue on Thursday night, went into West Lafayette, and knocked off the Boilermakers. And obviously I think Northwestern is a little bit a higher regarded program, but you go on the road for your opening game. It's a conference opponent. that's pretty exciting to do that. So Northwestern has the longest winning streak of any team in FBS right now, I think. They haven't lost since, like, I don't know, maybe October of last year, probably whenever they had to play Wisconsin. So it's really exciting. If Northwestern can sort of keep it up, if they can take care of business in their non-conference schedule, then really their only losses that they should have to worry about should be Wisconsin, and I don't know who they play from the eastern half of the Big Ten, but if they have to play, Ohio State or something, or Penn State, then that's probably a loss there. But they're good enough to compete. Northwestern could certainly finish the year ranked 20th or so, and grab not one of like those top 6 bowl games, but something shortly after if they play up to their potential, which is always the struggle bus for Northwestern. So anyways, good job, Cats. Go get them. I don't know who they're playing next week, but give it a couple more weeks and big conference play will start. The NFL season starting up here in 4 days. Thursday night, the defending Super Bowl champion Eagles, led once again by Nick Foles. Carson Wentz still not recovered from his ACL injury. Nick Foles the Eagles will host the Atlanta Falcons. That should be an exciting game. That's a rematch of division weekend last year. The Falcons came scarily close. We're talking inches close on a Julio Jones catch to knocking off the Eagles. Oh, geez, got a guy in my lane. Yikes. Which would have meant the Vikings would have hosted the Falcons, and I think most of us at that point would have picked the Vikings to win that game. But alas, that is not at all the way things actually happened. So that game should be exciting. I like the Falcons actually in that game. I don't know. I struggle to get behind the Eagles this year, but it's not for any sort of like Super Bowl hangover reason. It's literally just because I feel the same way about the Eagles now as I did like their entire Super Bowl run last year, where it was just like, yeah, they're a good team, they got a good record, they got good players on paper, but do I actually think they're the best? No, I don't. And of course they make me look like an idiot for thinking that, and now I'm thinking exactly the same way. But boy, Nick Foles has not looked great. He doesn't have a great track record career-wise for being Mr. Consistent. He played just shockingly amazing in the NFC Championship game versus the Vikings and in the Super Bowl last year versus the Patriots, two strong defenses. Do I really think that he can keep that up? No, I don't. And I also have major concerns. You asked me who are the Eagles' kind of skill players, wide receiver, running back, and tight end. They got Jay Ajayi, who's kind of been up and down in his career. Frankly, more down than up. Alshon Jeffrey is their top receiver, but he's out for multiple weeks. They got Nelson Aguilar, who's fine, but he's not, he's not amazing. He'd be like an average wide receiver 2 on your typical team, which is what he is for the Eagles. So that's not exactly a standout or anything. They lost. They still have Zach Ertz, who's a solid tight end option, but they lost Trey Burton. They signed with the Bears. I guess they probably have Corey Clement still, or Corey Clement, however you pronounce his last name, kind of to spell Ajayi, but Ajayi is usually the guy who's spelling someone else, so I'm not exactly sure what the run game looks like. So I would expect to see a lot of quick screens, quick hitters. I don't think they're going to have much of a traditional running game, and I think they'll just have to try to rely on their defense to keep them in games and sort of create some offense for them. Long story short, I do feel this time around, I do think a team like the Falcons or the Saints or the Vikings or the Rams, I do think those teams to start the season are in better shape than the Eagles. But I guess we'll find out. Home field advantage is very helpful, and the Eagles have been able to have that throughout their run last year and starting this year. So we'll see how it shakes out. That's the NFL season. Starts on Thursday. My Vikes will host the Jerick McKinnon-less San Francisco 49ers. Poor McKinnon went down, practiced yesterday, tore his ACL. He is out for the year. So best wishes to Jarek and speedy recovery. Hopefully we'll see her on next year. But yeah, that guy, he's now dangerously close to just kind of fading away. His NFL career never really getting on the radar. So we'll see what happens there. That's always tough when you tear your ACL. But Vikings hosting Jimmy Garoppolo, Eastern Illinois alum, has never lost a start, and I think that is going to change because I don't know who San Francisco's weapons are. Besides Marquise Goodwin, who is, again, fine. He's got a good connection with Jimmy G, but I don't think he's actually talented enough to make much of a dent. We're talking Xavier Rhodes here, #1 cornerback in football, and you're trying to tell me Marquise Goodwin is going to go up there and make him look foolish? I don't probably think so. So I think the Vikings should take care of business against San Francisco week 1. There are never any easy games in the NFL, and San Francisco is a little bit of a unknown product here, but unless Kirk Cousins just really lays an egg, I think the Vikes got this. Bears and Packers open up the Sunday Night Football schedule from Lambeau Sunday night, a week from today. That's going to be exciting. A lot of people are very excited about the Bears, particularly. I show up yesterday morning. I'm leaving O'Hare in my rental car about half hour after I leave the city. And I'm listening to 720, 670, whatever. And the Khalil Mack news breaks, which is insane. The Bears traded 2 first-round picks to Oakland for Khalil Mack, arguably the best defensive player in football. You could argue between Khalil Mack, J.J. Watt, maybe Xavier Rhodes as a cornerback, or there's a defensive end I'm forgetting, Everson Griffin. But, yeah, Khalil Mack, linebacker for the, defensive end linebacker. I'm not sure how the Bears will use him, but for the Raiders, fantastic player. I don't know what's happening in Oakland. I don't know what John Gruden's plan is. Considering the guy hasn't coached in 15 years, maybe he's just gone crazy. Not sure. The Raiders dropped Martavis Bryant. I don't know who their receivers are behind Amari Cooper. I don't know how much Marshawn Lynch has left in the tank, considering this guy retired like 3 years ago, and all of a sudden now he's back and he's still playing. I don't know how much Marshawn has left. I guess we're going to find out in a week. But yeah, that was the big shocking trade. Good for the Bears. A lot of people here are excited, as they should be. They locked him up for, 4 or 5 years, maybe 6. Highest paid player ever. Highest paid defensive player ever in NFL history, which is exciting for him, exciting for the Bears. A little Urlacher 2.0 perhaps. So good for those guys. And yeah, Bears are going to be a tougher out this year. People on, get the callers in, Bob from Elk Grove and stuff, are like, oh, Bears, Super Bowl, this is the year, 11, 12 wins, and no, they're not there yet. And this isn't going to be me bashing on the Bears, but what did they win? 5 games last year, something like that. Sure, you get Trubisky in year 2 now. You got them a whole bunch of new weapons, which is fantastic. They absolutely needed that. But these things don't just start week 1. You don't all of a sudden have Allen Robinson and Trey Burton and Tariq Cohen all part of the offense, and it just clicks instantly, particularly when you're playing against teams like the Vikings, who have fantastic secondaries. Now, maybe they'll be able to make it work against the Packers, who have a notoriously lackluster defense. I guess we'll find out on Sunday night. But, yeah, the Bears can be a lot tougher this year. The defense will keep them in some games. Don't be surprised if the Bears can get closer to 7 or 8 wins this year. They have a fairly easy schedule. There are a lot of games for them that they should just straight up be able to take care of if they take care of the football the way that they are capable of. So don't be surprised if the Bears kind of leapfrog the Lions this year into sort of third place in the NFC North pecking order. Not that I don't like the Lions this year, just I'm not really sure what direction that franchise is going in. As long as you have Stafford and Golden Tate and Marvin Jones, they're going to get you your 7 to 9 wins a year, but the defense really isn't anything special. The Lions have not had a good rushing attack since I couldn't tell you when. Occasionally they'll get one random strong game from Reggie Bush or Javid Best or Amir Abdullah or whoever the ice cream flavor of the week is, but they just can never get any sort of consistency out of that rushing attack, and that's why they're not good enough. I mean, they made it to the playoffs for the first time in forever. It was like 5 or 6 years ago. I think they lost to the Saints. That's when I was in high school, so maybe 6 or 7 years ago. And then since then, they just kind of been close, not quite good enough, and that's just how I feel about the Lions every year now. So still a tough game, not an easy game for anyone, but I don't know if they're quite good enough. I don't know what the future of that franchise is as Matt Stafford kind of gets into the last probably 6 or 7 years of his career. So anyways, wow, it's really turned into the football rambling podcast, but I think it's appropriate, right? NFL season will be in full swing by the time the next Beantown podcast episode drops. So today has been really interesting. We talked about Indiana, we have talked about penis rings, and we've talked extensively about football. Apologies to pretty much anyone who listens. I know these aren't your topics, these aren't your cups of tea, but that's the thing with the Beantown podcast. You never know what you're going to get. It's variety for your daily life. We are the Beantown podcast, the people's podcast, and when you only have 30 to 60 minutes every week, you're not going to be able to please every population of person. So to all my football fans, to all my penis ring fans, and to all my Indiana residents out there, you're welcome. This podcast is dedicated solely to you as we get into minutes 38 here. Let's see, anything else I wanted to talk about? Looking forward tomorrow. A quick shout out to my friend and former roommate, Sam Anderson, who was on my freshman year intramural football team. We weren't that good, but we had fun. I am meeting up with my friend Sam tomorrow. He lives in Milwaukee now, works a sick sports marketing job up there. We're going to Miller Park. Brewers versus Cubs, 1 p.m. tomorrow afternoon. I have not been to a Cubs game this year, so that is really exciting for me. I have not been to Miller Park since I was probably, 10 or 11, something like that, 12, 13. So it's going to be a good time. I got us some tickets. He's a big Brewers fan, Packers fan. I'm a big Cubs fan. So that should be fun. We got Cole Hamels going for the Cubs. Just looking forward to it. I haven't been to Milwaukee in a couple of years. I'm going deep under behind the cheddar curtain, so pray for me. I'll make sure to get some cheese curds, and then starting Tuesday morning, we for my actual job that I actually get paid for, we're doing some big time heavy lifting, a lot of long days, a lot of speaking engagements, a lot of cough drops and coffee. So wish us luck as we get into that. Go Cubs as they take on the Brew Crew tomorrow. Go Vikes next week, hosting the 49ers. And that's pretty much what I've got for you on the podcast. Yeah. This has been Quinn David Furness. We have come to you live from Indiana, the natural state. It has been a lot of fun to be able to do this, to kick off our tour. Thank you again and again to Hunter, my dear friend, for your sick new pad and for hosting us and for just having a fun weekend, doing the draft and setting up all that stuff. A lot of behind-the-scenes work. Also, thank you to Hunter. Stay tuned in next week as we come to you live from Chicago. It'll be the first of 2 tour dates in Chicago. We got another one, as mentioned earlier, in mid-October. So All that stuff and more coming up on the Beantown Podcast, the People's Podcast, one of Baltimore City's top 500 podcasts. This has been our first ever podcast live from the road, which is really exciting, broadcasting out across the nation. So thank you for tuning in. I am pretty sure that our audio quality is way better than last week. We're not underwater anymore. Life should be good. Life should be very good for the Beantown Podcast. So we hit our sweet spot. We're at 41, closer to 42 minutes, which is great because that's Jackie's number. Anyways, thanks for tuning in. Remember to like, share, subscribe. Facebook, our Twitter handle is at whitebuns. You know what? I shared that earlier. That's not correct. That's my personal Twitter handle. I knew that sounded incorrect. The Beantown Podcast Twitter handle is at BeantownCast. My personal, you can follow me there. It's not that exciting, I promise, but it's at White Buns. But the Beantown Podcast Twitter handle is BeantownCast. Email us, BeantownPodcast@yahoo.com. That's Beantown, BEANTOWN, podcast@yahoo.com. No Last Co. You can follow him on Instagram. That's places.in.chicago. We're going to get another full ad for you next week. Thanks for sponsoring the podcast. As always, we appreciate our loyal listeners, and we appreciate our loyal sponsors. Okay, that's going to wrap it up live from Indiana. Maybe we'll be back in a couple of years, but thank you to all. Thank you for hosting us. Thank you, Mike Pence. We will check in on you next week live from Chicago. Have a great Labor Day weekend, everyone. See ya.